This video is sponsored by Knuckles0x, Crimson Manifesto, and Jopi. Bardock and his family are just finishing their first week or so on Earth, and Bardock is just now beginning to overindulge in his vices, through having come into contact with stuff like Gohan stowed away sake, and an old pipe and some incredibly stale tobacco, which Roshi had given him a long time ago. These things are thereby quickly depleted by the Saiyan, who seems to stew all the more negativity because of this. While around him, his family are making more wholehearted attempts to embrace their new home, as much as they can, with Guinea exploring the mountain and his food sources more and more, while Raditz and Kakarot have found playmates in one another. Though sadly, this for Raditz means constantly lording his strength over the younger boy. After enough of his pouting and grumpiness, Gohan agrees to go and get Bardock more booze and a carton of those cigarette things he's heard of, claiming them as a fairly simple errand to complete, while he's taking Guinea to the city for the first time today. Bardock of course has no interest in going this time, and as a result the boys aren't too interested either, though this is mostly a decision led by Raditz, who now that he can seemingly get his father's time of day since the incident, makes a bid to ask him to do some training with he and Kakarot, hoping this may be a way to bury the hatchet. After a pause and some mulling over, Bardock agrees, it being something he meant to do rather than be completely passive in his pitiful hiding. Should the day come when the Freeze the Force scouts for deserters or Saiyan survivors, the more military strength this unit, or family, had, the better. However, as he joins the two youths outside to watch their tussling while leaning against a tree, he's all too quickly reminded why he had no interest in training up his own brats. The oldest boy had decent enough power for his age to be recognized by elite, sure, but he was by no means the first, as even Bardock at one point and Guinea had been offered the same thing, either with the real goal of being made a meat shield or a fall guy for missions that got a bit too costly in destruction, or in the case of a girl like Guinea, serving as some blowhard's arm candy. Sometimes, those above you just like to have someone to look down on. Otherwise, they lose that perspective, and it just becomes the same view of the same shitty universe we all live in. Unfortunately, that short stint with the elites had also seen some of this mentality rub off on Raditz, as what he was calling training was very obviously just him bullying Kakarot, rather than actually trying to help the other brat gain invaluable combat experience. And speaking of that evaluation, while the youngest is a plain and simple weakling, as much as he hates the elitist term, he fits the definition of low-class trash that even he'd hardly spare a second glance at, if not for their relation by blood. It's almost enough to shame him, though on the bright side, there are no Saiyans left to ridicule him for such a failed lineage. And at this bitter and dark joke, Bardock actually laughs to himself, walking over to join Raditz as he pins Kakarot down beneath his foot, while mockingly telling him to say that he yields, just like they practiced, while the smaller boy squeals and scrambles for a way to escape him. However, once he sees Bardock looming over him, his instincts see him try to cower more under Raditz for protection. Looking up and catching sight of a similar cruel smirk as his own of the man, Raditz asks his dad if he saw that, seeing his father reach out to touch his head, and feeling elation as he awaits his praise. And just as soon as he does, Raditz is launched off his brother, and sits skidding in the dirt, as Bardock instead drives his knee into his gut, stepping over Kakarot, and seething as he grouches and grumbles about what a waste of time this is. Raditz begins to try and recover, to little avail, as he's forced to puke up that morning's breakfast, only to be kicked onto his back, and pinned under a heavy boot, just as Kakarot was, his father glaring down at him, and demanding to know what this lesson is supposed to be. Now shaken by pain and fear he doesn't understand, Raditz tries to defend himself. It's just the way the elites have been teaching him. Kakarot needs to first know his place if he wants to get any stronger. And hearing this stated aloud, Bardock agrees wholeheartedly, leaning down and very carefully applying the pressure on Raditz's sternum, as he tells his oldest boy that he's 100% correct, so that means in turn, he needs to learn the same thing, if that's how he wants to be. If he's going to define himself like an elite, he needs to be prepared to die like one too. At this suggestion, he increased the pressure slightly, and Raditz cries out the last of the air in his lungs, desperate for this to end, just as Kakarot had been. But Bardock continues to make a show of twistedly praising Raditz, calling him a smart boy, to know that there is always someone bigger and stronger waiting around the corner to crush them. Finally seeing his oldest son has learned this lesson far easier than Kakarot, or even he himself did, Bardock relents, before rounding and making his way back to his youngest, with intentions to be fair and give him the same treatment. However, just as he does, the boy throws dirt in his eye, slipping past him and hurriedly scooping up Raditz before making a break for it with an underhanded move he'd not expected from the soft whelp. The duo inexplicably learning the value of camaraderie through this ordeal, as Raditz getting his wits about him in turn flies Kakarot with him towards the city, likely in an attempt to go and snitch on Bardock to Guinea. Regaining his sight as the dirt is cleared away, the Saiyan slumps against the tree he'd been watching the boys from, and subsequently fells it by slamming the back of his head against it in a vain attempt to dull the feeling of disgust with himself using pain, resigning himself to be told off by Guinea once again, with the only silver lining being that with her return will come the sweet relief of booze once again. Despite himself, this slight relaxing allows his mind to wander back to a time he'd long since mostly forgotten, or at least tried to forget. We see back into the past, back on the lush and vibrant planet of Vegeta, not too long ago officially won from the now wiped out Tuffle race, as three young Saiyans are preparing for their next round of participation in the upcoming proving tournaments, all equally excited for this chance to show their strength and earn the recognition of the adults, so that they might be allowed to begin joining them with their mercenary and bounty hunting excursions now that the Saiyan Empire has begun a tentative relationship with the growing Cold Empire, under a certain tyrannical tycoon buying up more and more real estate and power in the universe, with force and fear as his secondary forms of currency, while the Saiyans get to use better technology and a guild of sorts to regulate their battle lust, keeping it well sated. King Cold merely takes a cut of the profits and claims to the planets they seize, with colonization being something Saiyans have little interest in. It's just a bit too much management and regulation. Once they have a home worth, they're good. And so it appears to be a beneficial partnership that will go on to shape the galaxy and its future before long. Hence these three boys' eagerness to make their names in this new grand age of pillaging and plundering. Their names, Ricello, Bardock, and Turles, as they engage in a raucous and rowdy fight in order to practice one last time before their matches tomorrow. The two boys, who share a remarkable resemblance to one another, also share a heated rivalry, as they are indeed brothers, as one would expect, though only by a half-blood. Still, sibling rivalries are the same in any age, and so Ricello, as the odd man out, soon enough finds himself torn from their half-speed practice into a full-speed attempt to get the two to stop wailing on one another and lowering their chances for the tournament, though Bardock seemingly gives the reprieve, proving his brother's power less than his and pinning him down underfoot, where he demands he yield, though they share tenacity, and so instead, Turles offers his half-brother dirt for his eyes rather than submission, attempting to wriggle away and capitalize. But having expected such underhandedness, Bardock was wise enough to clench one eye shut, allowing him to keep his vision and increase the pressure on Turles' sternum, roaring for him to yield with a smug chuckle as he wipes the dirt and sweat away, until a harsher baritone interrupts, the two boys soon looking up to see a man they recognize as their father coming to loom over them, the so-called Mighty Cognac, smelling of space booze and traveling with a group of floozy Saiyan women, one of which is the second in command of his squad, and Turles' mother, Korn, though all are decked out in that slick armor gifted by the Cold Force. The man demands to know what's going on, and quick as a flash, Bardock allows his half-brother up, even helping him to stand, as they explain they're preparing for their tournament match tomorrow, and he and Turles just got a bit carried away, finishing his explanation with an awkward uttering of "sir," as truth be told, this is only around the 4th or 5th time he's ever met the man, having no familiarity to call much else. And chuckling at his son's naivete, Cognac says that it looked like fun, suddenly kicking Bardock to the ground and pinning him down as he had Turles, scolding his technically oldest brat not to get so cocky and big-headed, apparently having already expressed that he doesn't think any of them ready for real missions as of now. And so he is evidently unhappy with their participation and advancement thus far in the tourney, deciding to express his discontent by asserting the duo better not embarrass him tomorrow by getting beaten too badly, accentuating these demands with slight stomps on Bardock's belly to focus him on the pain and fear of being weaker and smaller than him, rather than his vain attempts to get away, leaving him in a situation now where he wishes he too had a mother to get him out of binds like this, or even knew the woman's name or face to imagine it for a slight reprieve. But Bardock is instead forced to rely on Korn as the closest surrogate for him, looking desperately at her indifferent stare. She finally gets bored of his screams and squeals, before she shoos the rest of Cognac groupies away and tells him to knock it off. Hearing this, and agreeing he too is bored, the man proceeds to enter his hut with his woman on his heels, while Turles and Ricello stop to check on Bardock, trying to hold him back as he roars at his father that he'll prove he's ready. But even so, the next day, the boys' preparation and Cognac's warning seem to offer little support against their stronger and older opponents, seeing them thoroughly on the back foot, and worse, not even supported by the crowd watching the matches, as even Korn eventually stands and leaves out of embarrassment, while Cognac had never even attended. However, even so, when the three boys are on their last legs and appear to be close to defeat, Bardock tells them to pull a Turles, seeing the three simultaneously sling dirt in the eyes of their opponents and escape from underfoot, allowing them to roll to freedom and tie the other three boys' tails together in the chaos, leaving them frazzled and vulnerable as they try to undo these two back-to-back vile tricks, and thus giving the younger trio ample time to charge up and unleash a triple key blast that blows their betters out of the ring. Thus a classic case of brain over brawn, with the Saiyan refereeing the match declaring it over, even if he seems hesitant to call the match in the favor of the weaker team. Nonetheless, as they desired, the trio were deemed as proven warriors, given the option to take a job from the Cold Empire and begin their legends with their own equipment and such. Excitedly, Bardock and Turles rush home to share this news, but when to make Korn there, they are only met with a crudely left note to inform them that their parents are once again at the bar, with little intention to return home that night. Turles seems more actually hurt by this, while it only adds to Bardock's anger, and so decide they may as well set off as soon as they rested up, seeing them somehow talk Ricello into this plan of action. So before the next day, they accept a mission to a planet called Desert, which was reported to be fairly sparse of life, though the few life forms on the planet are supposedly powerful. Needless to say, the mission doesn't go well, as despite Cognac's flaws and crude way of warning them, the boys indeed are not ready, especially for a mission like this. This fact sinking in horrifically for the two half-brothers, when Ricello is there 1 minute to warn them to watch their backs, and then crushed under the foot of one of the planet's monsters in the next. Given no time to even mourn or respect their friends in, the two instantly have to abandon pride in favor of preservation and fleeing, spending the next week or so doing their best to avoid these creatures and survive on their way back to their ship, which they eventually realize was damaged on their landing. And so with no hope left, they begin to be slowly whittled down by the harsh environment and the endless pursuit of the monsters, as well as the lack of food. And just as they get to their weakest, they are cornered once again. Though they fight together, in a surprise turn of events, Turles' body acts on its own, seeing him shove Bardock away to save him, and seemingly dying in the process under the foot of another beast. With this loss stunning Bardock, as he does all he can to keep his resolve, and fight to his brother's side, and if nothing else, gets some article of him to bring back to Korn his father. But he's not even given the room or luxury to soak a cloth in Turles' blood, seeing the last Saiyan standing brutally ganged up on as the monsters begin using pack tactics, enjoying killing the last living thing on this planet other than themselves, leaving Bardock to scream in terror as what appears to be his final moments is the claw of one of these horrifying monsters cutting a massive gash near his jaw. But that roll of the dice, split second, and shrill noise has brought the time and attention needed for saviors to arrive, in the form of Cognac Squad, who appear and rain down hell on the monsters, doing enough to drive them back and away from Bardock, even as a few of the mid-class warriors seem to struggle, and thus attesting to how out of their depths the brats were, as while he's being rescued and fading in and out of consciousness, Bardock can hear power levels of well over 1,000 from a Saiyan holding a hand scope, at which point, the spiky-haired man leaving this group wisely makes in order to retreat immediately, ignoring Corrin's scorn, and screeches at him, as she realizes her own son was not the one to be saved, berating Cognac as just a lower than low class, while a few of the other men on the squad laugh that she should cut him some slack, reminding the nickname Cognac the Mighty is in reference to the fool's constitution when it comes to booze, and that she shouldn't place so much faith in a clown. And in those moments, as his broken body is shoved into a ship and dragged back to planet Vegeta to face further ridicule, Bardock can only think on how bitterly ironic it is to have lost both his brother and comrade in the pursuit of living up to a man with no greater amount of respect than they already have. And as a shadow of anger and resentment like he has never known passes over his heart, he resolves then and there to make a real squad of his own, and one day surpass this old drunk bastard, so he can wipe his name from the history books and this tarnishment off his lineage, while giving a final silent prayer for his brother's passage into the next world as he passes out. No one noticing among the chaos of their escape that Turles' crumpled and crushed body eventually would stir back to life, if only for a last gasp at dying in conscious agony rather than slipping away without a fight. But even through the haze of a severe concussion, he can see something bright and red. And so, using it to focus, his last action before his strength runs out completely is to crawl to and just close his hand around what he realizes is a fruit. In fact, the only edible thing he'd seen on this planet, which might suggest it is nothing but trouble and likely not fit for consumption. But he can faintly hear the rumbling of the creatures, likely approaching once again, as well as the dull ringing of his scrambled brains. And so, with no other options but to lie there and die, he takes a bite. With the start, Bardock wakes up, unaware of when he dozed off, or even why such a memory would rear its ugly head, much less why his imagination would conjure such cruel falsehoods as those last images of Turles. But like he has made a habit of, he pushes these feelings down, instead facing the angry form of Gine, who is currently standing over him and glaring down, the form of a cowering Kakarot and a smug-looking rat that's hiding behind her legs, and thus seeing the scarred Saiyan sigh and prepare himself for yet another argument with his mate. But this is where we'll be leaving this story off for right now. Alright, that is 1.5. I'm gonna admit, I became hesitant to do this part, partially because it is a backstep and look into who Bardock was when we've been really focused on who he can become, but also because I knew it would be longer. It's gonna force me to use a little headcanon to fill some spaces if I wanted to play with Bardock's own background, and it was also gonna be a challenge for me to try doing some stuff in Bardock's past without using characters like Toma, Celipa, and the gang. Or Gine and the eagle-eyed among you will probably recognize this is an adaptation of the events seen in Dragon Ball Zero, the fan manga by Toibo aka Tuatara about Raditz. It is also a massive inspiration and one of the things that got adapted into my What If Goku Joined Raditz, so you should also go check that out if you really do like this setup. Also just go read the original fan manga if you have yet to yet. I really enjoy it. I went ahead and used it again because I thought certain parts of it for Bardock's flashback here would be fitting since it's a look into Saiyan society as it once was, kind of before the full annexation of Planet Vegeta, or at least that's what I wanted this version to be. And another little thing that it lets me make sure I can do is continue to make characterization with Bardock having aspects of both Goku and Raditz as well, and I really want to keep that up. Also, I am a big fan of interpretations of Turles that make him a good bit older than the likes of Goku and Vegeta and Raditz, so obviously in this story I have a bit of trouble passing up the opportunity to make use of him, hence my going ahead and setting him up as well as connecting him to Bardock and even filling out the family tree some. Plus, I kinda do owe him from how he was treated in Goku Joined Raditz, so him making an appearance in this story as more of an antagonist would actually be kinda fitting. While I'm signing out, I'd like to give a big shout out to Valerius Valle and Mr. Negative for their help with the visuals of this story, as well as to any miscellaneous creators whose work may have been featured. Also to my pal Pickle Dill for a script review, and to you all for the views. And if you would be so kind, be sure to leave a like and subscribe as well, because that's a big way to help out the channel. And if you want to really help out the channel, consider joining the ranks of the direct supporters of the channel, like Arcane of the Heart, Tay, Inebriated, John Sullivan, and Corporal Atkins. They, like a lot of the names you're seeing roll the screen right now, are people who receive perks like early access to content, sneak peeks of stuff, and some exclusive content that's just for supporters. So think on it for a bit. But as of right now, there's nothing left for me to say but take care of yourselves and the world around you, and as always, go beyond plus ultra. And I'll see you guys next time.